The first person to file a case in the tribunal was an accountant. The second person to file a case in the tribunal was Oscar Kambona. I started teaching in 1996. And I can name right from the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice Zeisha was my student at LDC. The Attorney General, I examined the Attorney General's class when I was at LDC. The Deputy Attorney General was my student. Madam Stella Nyapendi, who is here, the member of the Tax Appeals Tribunal, was my student. The chairperson of the Tax Appeals Tribunal, Kabajwara, was my student, Christian. And that's how, when you look at the records, that's how you realize that I had so many cases in the early years of the Tax Appeals Tribunal. Because I entered the partnership with PricewaterhouseCoopers. They do the objection, I do the tax litigation. And that synergy, that partnership worked so much using URA. That's why many people, very few people believed when I went to court and argued in Rabo that the first court of instance is the tribunal. Now, lawyers were up in arms against me. They were saying, Oscar, we want to go to the High Court straight away because of 30%. Now you are telling us to go to the tribunal because we have to pay 30%. You have Kambona, you have Katulebe, you have Karuhanga, you have Mayanja. What name are you going to call this firm? And we agreed that let's do something different. Let's do something different. Can we now use a generic name? There was no generic name at that time. And that's how we came up with Kampala Associated Advocates. To answer your question, my quest for knowledge, which then translates into growth for me, drove me to do further studies. Because I'm learning. And as you will see, my thesis in PhD was not only on taxation, but the link between taxation and human rights. Enforcement of taxation and human rights. I have a dream that tax practice is going to grow and become the dominant practice in Uganda.
Ladies and gentlemen, first things first, let's all give a very big round of applause. I'll tell you why. So first things first, can you please kindly give a very big round of applause? That would be for Otim and I, but for a gentleman befitting of Dr. Kambona's stature, we can do better. That's pretty good enough. So the reason why we're clapping is because this gentleman right here is so kind. He had a very tensed up schedule. He came all the way from up country, but he insisted I have to be here and I have to speak to the younger colleagues over here. Colleagues, that's very befitting of you, Dr. Kambona. So let's appreciate him one more time. Thank you very much. And Dr. Kambona, all these people right here are very excited to listen to you, to get to know your story, to learn a thing or two from you. So first things first, congratulations, Dr. Kambona. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kambona, if you don't know, he holds a PhD in tax law. That's very rare in our practice. And I think it also deserves another round of applause. Another one to that, ladies. So congratulations, Dr. Kambona.
Thank you.
Dr. Kambona, very many people in here have been very interested in knowing this gentleman we've seen make news everywhere. Dr. Kambona, all of us have had a thing or two about him. They're very interested in getting to know who is the person behind Dr. Kambona. So Dr. Kambona, just to kick us off, tell us briefly who is Dr. Kambona and who is the gentleman behind the titles.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure being here this evening to share with you about my experience in the tax field. And in the interest of time, I'll specifically answer the questions that are posed. And a lot has been said about me. A lot has been written. There's a profile that was sent out. but I'll focus on what is not there. Kambona is a leader without a title. That's the Kambona you want to know. I am a leader without a title. A leader in many respects, personal leadership, and we'll talk more about personal leadership, but also a leader in the spiritual awakening. I do a lot of reading on the spiritual side of things, but more importantly, I'm a father, I'm a parent. I have a family of young daughters and sons, and as far as the profession is concerned, yes, a lawyer, an advocate of the High Court and the courts thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kambona. I think we've learned a thing or two about Dr. Kambona. But Dr. Kambona, what we normally do here is we're always very interested in your story. So walk us down the memory lane. When you're starting out, was legal practice something you envisaged in school? Was it something you're very excited? Is it something you picked along the way? Just walk us down the memory lane 30, 40, 50 years ago. Where did it start from?
So this journey, my journey started in the rural area known as Kasese district. Went through the schools, primary school, secondary school, and then eventually, after my senior six, interestingly, the time I finished my senior six, Uganda had introduced what they call the compulsory political training at Chankwanzi. That was in 1991, March 1991. So I went for the compulsory political training for senior six graduates, and while there, by then our results had not come out. So while there, I had an interaction with students from other schools. And we also had guest speakers who used to come and make presentations to us at the political school in Chankwanzi. And one of the guest speakers was the commissioner in charge of customs department in the Ministry of Finance. Remember, I'm saying this is 1991 March, and by then the Uganda Revenue Authority had not been formed. Uganda Revenue Authority was formed in August, September that year. So he talked to us about the role of paying taxes. And I became a bit curious. Why is this government interested in sending people to come and talk to students who are planning to go to university about taxes? And the key word he talked about was responsibility. That for you as a Ugandan, you have a responsibility to pay taxes. And if you are to become a taxpayer, you must know about taxes. So at that point, of course, he explained to us about the plans by government to introduce an agency known as the Uganda Revenue Authority. So it piqued my curiosity about taxes and why is it important for me as a student going to university to know talk about taxes. And it became clear that taxation was actually a creation of law, that taxes are actually provided in the law. So I inquired more about it, and I found that the law in tax laws is actually taught to lawyers. Lawyers are taught law, and if taxation is part of law, then as a lawyer I need to know more about taxation. So the curiosity about taxes and the fact that it is part of law was birthed during that period. So anyway, long story forward, short, I went to Makerere University, and interestingly, in my second year at university, Professor Bachibinga had been appointed as the first head of legal services at the URA, which had been established in 1991. And in the second year, he decides to introduce revenue law and taxation at the Faculty of Law. Now remember, you're a student at the university. At that time, law was taught in 3 years. It was not 4 years. We were doing law in 3 years. So in second year, they introduce a new subject. You want to pass. That's your key point. And there are all these other subjects that you can pass because you have got notes on it and everything. And here is a subject being introduced, and you have no clue about it. So everybody in our year, we were 46 in our class. So everybody in our class was saying, no, I want to go and do that subject. I want to take that subject, which I'm not sure about passing. So we ended up being 3 students in that class. Myself, Robert Kamshenga, the former executive director of New Vision, and Benson Tsasirwe. I don't know whether many of you from Mackay University remember Benson Tsasirwe. So we're only 3 who actually applied to do the course. So I take on the course. Remember, I had that curiosity that was behind me, telling me you need to know more about tax. So I go for that course. And one thing led to the other. I completed the course, but also chose to do my research in taxation. So I will end there because later on I will talk how I eventually venture into practicing taxation. But about studying taxation, remember I had that curiosity coming from the political school in Chankwanzi, but also opportunity presenting itself where it is now presented as a subject at law school. And that's how my interest in taxation is birthed, and later on ending up in practice, which I will explain later.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I think we all agree, some people are born for this. Doctor, in his senior 6, he was already learning a thing or two about taxes. He gets to law school, there are 3 in a class. So definitely we believe you're meant for that. Thank you very much, Doctor. So Doctor, fast forward, how then do you start your practice? Law school is done. Where do you start from? And was it still a niche in tax?
So I need to mention this very early on. At the time we started law school, taxation was not part of the subjects taught at law school. That means that taxation was a preserve of accountants. It was taught in the Faculty of Commerce, and those who were practicing as accountants were the ones practicing law. So there were no tax lawyers in Uganda. So when I finish 3rd year and go to LDC, LDC had a subject, revenue law and taxation, but it was being taught by an accountant because there were no tax lawyers who had studied tax law. So I study LDC, I finish my diploma, and because we were the pioneers of revenue law and taxation at campus, LDC requests me to remain behind as a lecturer at LDC. So immediately I leave LDC. LDC is looking for a lawyer to teach revenue law and taxation. And remember, I have just done as a pioneer of revenue law and taxation. So that's how I start teaching at LDC, immediately in 1995-96. That's how I start teaching revenue law and taxation at LDC. So the fact that I was now teaching revenue law and taxation encouraged me now to ask myself the question that then decides my future in tax practice. And my question was simple. Oscar, taxation is law, correct? No tax can be charged unless it's provided for in a law, correct? You are a lawyer, correct? You are taught to interpret law, correct? Why is it that you're not interpreting tax law as a practitioner? Why is it that taxation is now being left as a preserve of accountants? That was the question I asked myself. And the answer was simple. The answer was the best person, in addition to accountants, the best person to interpret a law is a lawyer. Because you are taught principles of interpretation. Isn't that one of the courses in Introduction of Law? You are taught how to interpret law. So for me, taxation was therefore a matter of interpreting the law. And I'll tell you one example. Shortly after I make that decision, and shortly after I start teaching law, in 1997, another coincidence, and this is why I will explain later. Success in whatever you do is defined as preparation, meeting, opportunity. So you must be prepared. And the question was, what are the opportunities that avail themselves? So, A, I said, you get Bachibinga to come and teach. But B, in 1997, the Tax Appeals Tribunal is then formed. The Tax Appeals Tribunal to adjudicate tax disputes is formed. And here I am being consulted about the law that was being made to establish a Tax Appeals Tribunal, because the Parliament of Uganda wrote to LDC Law Society to make comments about the law. So I was the one at LDC teaching taxation. So it came to me. So I started talking about the tribunal, learning about the tribunal, advising on the tribunal. And once it's established, of course, I want to appear before the tribunal. So this is the story that I like to share. I appear, I think I was the first person to file a case in the tribunal was an accountant. The second person to file a case in the tribunal was Oscar Kambona. Now, what case do I file? I filed a case, if you look in the history, you will see it, Uganda Consolidated Properties versus URA. Now, what was the dispute? The dispute in that case was that the company had sold a house and had not charged VAT. The URA said, no, look, you sold a house, you sold a building, and therefore you must pay tax, VAT. The law had an exception. If you sold land, there would be no tax. Now, of course, the question of saying you've sold a building did not tickle many people. But what tickled me then was that that building is part of land. And anything part of land is land. In fact, you don't have a title which says a building. You have a title which says land. So my question was, the moment I sell a building which is on land, I have sold land. So I went to the tribunal and said, look, these people did not sell a building, they sold land. And that's how the law was amended to say, if you only sell undeveloped land, the law was amended. If you sold undeveloped land, then you're exempt. If you sold developed land, then you pay tax. But the point is, for me, I got tickled by those aspects that for me as a lawyer in my land law class, I was taught that land and buildings are one and the same. And it is as obvious as it is, but then it was not as obvious as it looked. So that's how I pick interest in land, and as they say, the rest is history.
Thank you very much, Doctor. That there is very inspiring. But Doctor, just to take you back to teaching law, you taught law for very many years at the Law Development Center. Then you equally taught at the National University of Rwanda. What was your experience like teaching law? Then are there any prominent practitioners that went through your gifted hands, just for us to get to know?
Teaching law was interesting. In fact, teaching for me is my passion. There is a saying that the best way to learn is to teach. And for me, the more I taught is the more I learned. So teaching was part and parcel of the things that I was passionate about. So my experience teaching law and taxation in particular is that every time a student would enter my class at LDC, the first impression they came with was that we are going to deal with the calculations. So they always came with this bias. Oscar's class is taxation, mathematics. I don't like mathematics. I'm a lawyer. I don't like mathematics. And for me, I had to demystify that. And my point was, and I always made the point, as a lawyer, you need the services of an accountant. The accountants have mastered their art in understanding the calculations as far as taxation is concerned. Me as a lawyer, I must work hand in hand with an accountant. I don't have to do the computation myself. The accountant will do that. What I need to do is to then pick the case and go and litigate it. So I made it very clear early on that there is need for synergy. Accountants and lawyers need each other. You don't want to do an accountant's work and the accountant does not need to do the lawyer's work. And so the first impression I had was to demystify this notion that taxation is technical, taxation is mathematics. And I focused on the things that did not necessarily focus on taxation, on mathematics. Now, my experience, who did I teach? I said to you that I started teaching in 1996. And I can name right from the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice Zeisha was my student at LDC. The Attorney General, I examined the Attorney General's class when I was at LDC. The Deputy Attorney General was my student. The DPP, the Principal Judge, I'm talking about lawyers that you may relate with. But within the tax field, Madam Stella Nyapendi, who is here, the member of the Tax Appeals Tribunal, was my student. The chairperson of the Tax Appeals Tribunal, Kabajwara, was my student. Crystal was my student. So I can go on, but interestingly, I taught quite a number of people who even came for LDC as a diploma. Mr. Sifas Birunji, for example, had qualified many years ahead of me, but he had not done his postgraduate diploma from LDC. So he came later and he became my student at LDC. But the most interesting thing I found about teaching people and sharing knowledge is that all my students became my examiners at my PhD and LLM class. My supervisor, Mr. Christopher Mbazira, was one of my students in 1999, but he became my supervisor at my PhD. And so the question of sharing knowledge and later on benefiting from it became very evident. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Kambona. That there is a very prominent profile of your students, CJ, Deputy CJ, AG, quite prominent. But Doctor, another story that is a very big part of your life is the Uganda Tax Bureau. Very many of us might not be knowing a thing or two about it. Do you mind just speaking to us about the Uganda Tax Bureau? What was it? When did you start it? Why did you start it?
So when I filed the first case, remember the Tax Appeals Tribunal did not require you to file under a law firm. You could even file as an individual. And I think that's still the case. When I filed as an individual, it became apparent to me that practice in the tax space was something I would enjoy doing. But I didn't want to mix it with criminal law, land law. I wanted to focus on taxation. Now, I want to mention something very important. One of the things I used to tell my students, and I still share with my colleagues, is that you must know your strength. For you to be successful in whatever you are doing, you must know your strength. We keep talking about specialization, tax specialization, but more importantly where is my strength? My strength, I discovered, was in tax litigation. It was not necessarily in tax advisory. It was in tax litigation. And that's why I realized that the best thing I could do was to have a vehicle that does not necessarily fall under the law counsel, but also specializes in taxation. And that's how I formed the Uganda Tax Bureau. It was specifically about tax litigation and a bit of tax advisory. And I must emphasize the aspect of synergy. From day one, I told my clients in Uganda Tax Bureau, I will not draft for you an objection. you'll go to an audit firm. They will do the preparation. They will do the objection. When that is not accepted by the URA, I will then go to the tribunal. And mark this, the accountant then becomes my witness. How strong is your team where you have an accountant who has understood the whole case, has done everything as your first witness? They will simplify everything as you litigate through the processes. Why do the accountants still need you? Because if the matter goes on appeal, then you need an advocate. So that's why I keep encouraging my clients and say, let's separate the roles. Let issues to do with objection, let issues to do with advisory fall under the audit firms. Let me then take up the matter as a litigator. Now, to answer your question, that then determines how and the focus of Uganda Tax Bureau. Uganda Tax Bureau was purely focused on the litigation part of it. And that's how I end up cooperating with the PricewaterhouseCoopers. At that time, again, opportunity meeting preparation. At that time, the director in charge of tax at PwC was a lady called Anna-Britt Asland. Anna-Britt Asland was Swedish, but she was an expatriate. So I used to refer my clients to her to go and do the objections and the rest. And then I would handle her cases when it goes to the tribunal. So I ended up entering a partnership with PricewaterhouseCoopers to litigate all their cases. And that's how, when you look at the records, that's how you realize that I had so many cases in the early years of the Tax Appeals Tribunal. Because I entered the partnership with PricewaterhouseCoopers. They do the objection, I do the tax litigation. And that synergy, that partnership worked so much. And I'm grateful I did that. And it is something that we must learn from. We have accountants here. We have auditors here. We have lawyers here. That collaboration is very important. Where is your strength? Is your strength in writing an objection? Or is your strength in taking up the case and using the auditor as your witness? That synergy is something that has helped me till today. And that's the history about the Uganda Tax Bureau.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kambona. I think we are learning a thing or two. Ladies and gentlemen, we're learning a thing or two of Dr. Kambona's vast experience. Do some work for them. But Dr. Kambona, another very big story that is part of your formative years of tax practice was you acting as external counsel for both the Uganda Revenue Authority and the Tax Appeals Tribunal at some point in time. Do you mind just speaking to us about your experience as external counsel for the URA and later on as external counsel also the Tax Appeals Tribunal?
I'll keep referring to this point of preparation and opportunity because it runs across my career. Opportunity, whenever an opportunity presents itself, I seize it. I'll jump on it and I'll do the best to keep it and profit from it. So what happens? I am partnering with PricewaterhouseCoopers to handle their cases on behalf of this lady I mentioned, Anna-Britt Asland, who is the director in PwC. 2 years later, the president appoints her the Commissioner General URA. Now remember, I'm working with her. She's been my witness in many cases. Now she's the Commissioner General, Uganda Revenue Authority. And she says, I want you to come and work with me. I said, but I'm conflicted. I am suing URA every day, and here you are asking me to represent you. And she said, no, we will create those Chinese walls. We will know those cases you are handling, and we will figure out those cases that you are not handling where we need your expertise in exceptional circumstances. Now, her argument, which made a bit of sense, was that there are certain cases where there are complaints of compromise. That was her argument. She was saying where some staff are being accused of having participated in compromising the case, it is better to have somebody independent handle such a case. And one of the cases, as you'll see from the record, I handled on behalf of URA was Rabo Enterprises versus URA. You all know how it ended. And for me, initially my point to her was that if it is a bad case, I will tell you. If it is a case I believe in, I will tell you, and I will handle it. By the time, I told her I won't be compromised by my position as a tax lawyer opposing URA. That's why very few people believed when I went to court and argued in Rabo that the first court of instance is the tribunal. Now, lawyers were up in arms against me. They were saying, Oscar, we want to go to the High Court straight away because of 30%. Now you are telling us to go to the tribunal because we have to pay 30%. And for me, what I believed in is that let's do the right thing. These institutions that are put in place have a purpose. So I went to the court and made my case in the High Court. The High Court ruled in my favor. The other party, Rabo, appealed. We went to the appeals court. They ruled against us. And their argument was, no, Oscar, you are wrong because the case of NPAT, the court ruled that court has got original jurisdiction. And my argument was, no, look at the section. It says, except as otherwise provided in this constitution, the court has got original jurisdiction. And my argument was, in the same constitution, there is a provision which says there shall be tax tribunal to deal with the tax disputes. So that is saved out of the original jurisdiction of the High Court. The Court of Appeal didn't agree, but the Supreme Court eventually agreed. And that's the law now. You must go first to the Tax Appeals Tribunal. But the point I want to emphasize here, my experience is that as lawyers, and this is what I want to encourage you to do, believe in your case. And once you believe in your case, once you believe it's the right thing, then do it. No matter the consequences. If I had been a populist, a person who pleases people, I would have shied away and said, you know what, lawyers are going to look at me with a different view. But my point was that is the right thing to do. We must give these institutions the mandate and the support to do their work. So that's briefly about my experience in URA as external counsel for the URA. Then subsequently, during the formative periods of the tribunal, yes, there were certain consultations that were being made, especially by the funders, the initial funders who were supporting the tribunal, and they were asking for some kind of external support, especially from lawyers who have been practicing, and that's how I ended up providing some support to the tribunal. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Such a distinguished career from teaching, consultant for URA tribunal. And Dr. Kambona, just to run us forward, you now head the tax practice at KA, a very prominent firm. But just walk us through your case story. At what point does KA come in the picture? How to start?
Opportunity means preparation. I am doing my tax practice in Uganda Tax Bureau. I get a call from the Attorney General then. The Attorney General was Bat Katulebe, who eventually became the Chief Justice. Bat Katulebe calls me and says, I am not going to contest. We come from the same constituency. He says, I'm not going to contest for MP, and I'm not going to remain in the government as a minister. I want to go into private practice. I see you a lot in the media doing a bit of taxation. That means you have an idea on practice in Uganda. Can we have a chat? Here is a man preparing to go into practice, a senior man, much senior than Kambona, a young man. But he has seen an opportunity in me as far as tax practice is concerned. So I go for lunch with him and we talk. And his vision was, I don't want a tax person to come to me asking for advice, and then I pretend to know tax advice, for example. I want a one-stop center where a person walks in, he has a tax dispute, go to Kambona. He has a land dispute, go to X. He has something to do with the government, go to the Katurebe. So his idea was, can we have a one-stop law firm? Remember, again, those days, that is 2001, to be specific, 2001, law firms were known to be people-centered. Sebalulule advocates, 2 partners, the rest are advocates. Katende Sempe, no, that's how the practice was at that time. They were using names. So I bought into the idea, and we said, can we get other people we can with like minds, and we work together to start that one-stop center. And that's how Eric Ruhanga, who was in parliament but had a law firm, comes on board. That's how Honorable Sam Mayanja, who is now the Minister of Lands, comes on board. And then we talked to Mr. Kabasi, Peter Kabasi, who then was the Solicitor General of Uganda. But he had 1 year of his contract, and so he could not join us at the start. So the 4 of us, the question we had, and we had to debate, was, what name do you call us? Do you call it? You have Kambona, you have Katurebe, you have Karuhanga, you have Mayanja. What name are you going to call this firm? And we agreed that let's do something different. Let's do something different. Can we now use a generic name? There was no generic name at that time. And that's how we came up with Kampala Associated Advocates. Was it easy? No. There was a fight. What do you mean by Kampala Associated Advocates? We are all advocates from Kampala. Why are you calling yourselves Kampala Associated Advocates? There was a fight. But the point we made to the law council, and which they were able to agree, was that time is coming when you are going to have 20 partners in a law firm. Are you going to call them all their names? And the answer was no. So the point was, let's start. The issue of what name you use is another debate. The first debate is, do we need a generic name? And once the answer was right, and yes, the rest followed. So that's how we start Kampala Associated Advocates. Myself, Justice Emeritus, Chief Justice Emeritus Bat Katurebe, Eric Ruhanga, many of you know about him, and Honorable Sam Mayanja, and that's how we start the law firm. And we went out and looked for what I would call the best of the best. Some of them had been my students, many of them. Tom Balinda, I think he has taught many of you. Tom Balinda was part of our staff. Wambuga, Sylvester Wambuga was one of our staff. So we went out and got what you'd call the best of the best, and we started KAA as it is, and the rest, as they say, is history.
All right, very interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope Oscar's story is generating questions, so feel free to note down your questions. I'll give an opportunity at the tail end to pose the question or two to Dr. Kambona. So Dr. Kambona, still on your KAA story, KAA today leads one of the most prominent tax teams. Yeah, the most prominent tax legal teams in the country. How does it feel leading such a prominent team? Does it come with any pressures? If you read random cases, at least every 10 cases you read, 1 or 2 will be by KAA. How does it feel leading such a prominent team?
One of the first, let me make this point very clear. If there is a point you are going to take from this evening, there should be, I think, 3 points. Number 1, preparation. But number 2 is the power of delegation and teamwork. If you think you are going to handle everything and excel in everything, you are missing the point. The power of teamwork. Synergy. The third point I want you to take from this meeting is the courage to be different. I want you to have the courage to be different. Just because things are done in a certain way, therefore I should do it in that way, must change. I know when you walk alone, there will be pressure. Look at this person, what does he call himself? You must have the courage to be different. You must have the courage to do different things. Be creative, be innovative. Now, to your question, how do I feel leading the KAA team? First of all, like I said, I believe in teamwork. And I believe in delegating. Sometimes my colleagues say I push them to the deep end so fast. I want to push you to the deep end and you find your way to the shallow end. Why? You gain experience. Of course, I will have oversight. So, one of the most important things I did early on was to get the right team in place. The Wambugas were not in tax. The Malindas were not interested in tax. But the point was to then look for people who were interested in tax. And one name that came up was the name of Bruce Musinguzi. Bruce Musinguzi is now a tax partner. He was around, he's just moved out. Bruce Musinguzi had worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Bruce Musinguzi has also worked with JP Morgan. He had done his master's in Georgetown in tax. The point was, we need this resource. Can we pay it? Can we give it enough resources to keep that resource? We must show them the opportunity to make it to the top. Sometimes we miss one point, that lawyers don't mind how much you pay them today, as long as they know that at some point X, there is a route to partnership. That can keep them going. Now, if you are going to remain an employee, my employee, the chances are, why don't I start my own law firm? Why do I have to work with you if I can start my own law firm? And that's what has been causing a problem of proliferation of firms. So at KAA, one of the things we assure you once you come KAA is that you will rise through the ranks and you will make partnership if you deserve it. So Bruce, for example, if I could use him as an example, joined us as an associate. He was my student at LDC and I had seen his brilliance. So I continued relating with him. So when he joined us, it was clear. If you work and excel, you will become partner. And as I speak now, he's a partner, tax partner in KAA. So what am I trying to say? To you who may be owning firms, to you who are working in firms, sometimes it may not necessarily be the money. Money is important. You have to pay bills. You have to find your way home. But is that the primary driver as I join you? Is that the driver that is going to keep me in your firm for 6-10 years? Maybe not. So, put in place systems that people can see. I know of some lawyers who work in audit firms and will tell you the ceiling I can make as a partner in a firm is managing director. I can't go beyond it and become partner. Why? Because the rules are very stringent. That means it gives you a platform, but that cannot be your end game. So at KAA, if I was to answer your question directly, I am privileged to work with the best. Before me here is one of our staff, our senior associate, Ferdinand Tumahise. Ferdinand was I think the best student at Makerere University, goes to Harvard and completes his tax in international practice, a master's in international practice. That resource is important to me. Why? Because I need somebody who has a bias on international taxation. Today, we talk about transfer pricing. It's the key thing now. Most of the cases coming to us are on transfer pricing. He has done his LLM in international tax. that resource will not stay with us unless he can see his way to the top. Why do I start my own law firm if I can become a partner in your firm? That's the question I want to leave with many of you. The question of empowerment. Can you empower people to see a future with your practice? Can you empower them? We also have Mr. Rugaya, Caesar here, who's now going to do his LLM. He has gotten a scholarship to go to the US and do his LLM. The point I'm making in many words, and I had to put emphasis on this, because I believe in a practice where you have 20 partners plus. In fact, when I'm talking to my colleagues at KAA, I ask them, what's our vision? What's our dream? Our dream cannot be to have billions on our account. No, that's not the dream. For me, what drives me is the dream of having a practice of 20 partners, 30 partners. Now, before I leave my experience in KAA, I want to mention something that stood out for us. At the start of KAA, we realized that it was important to partner with international law firms. Under our current law, an international law firm cannot come and practice in Uganda. But we realized that there are some clients, for example, in Nairobi, who have been working with a firm, who are comfortable with that firm. All I need to do is partner with them. And I will be sure that their clients will become my clients. So that's how we were the first law firm to partner with Dentons. You've heard of Dentons. We were in a partnership with them initially as KAA. Subsequently, a few years ago, they decided they wanted their own law firm in Uganda. And that's how they left to start Dentons as a law firm. But for us, we were not interested in a standalone international firm. We were interested in a partnership. And it worked for us, I can assure you. We got so many clients because of that association. And I want to encourage you, there are many international firms that want to work in Uganda. Why is it that when you talk about auditing and the rest, you talk about the big four? Because of that international aspect. PwC in Uganda is the same level of service you get here, is the same level of service you get in another country. And that is a selling point to many companies, many multinationals. They want consistency. That is something that I want to urge you. Yes, even if you are 5 partners, can you look, one of the things I'm going to be sharing with you, maybe I can share now, what stands you as a law firm from another law firm? Connections, networking. Coming here and spending time here, to some people, I should be in my bed or I should be having a drink somewhere else. There is power in networking. Some of these international firms that people are associated with, I can name them. You know, the Bowmans and the rest. Most of these tie-ins were starting from networks in international conferences. You go for an international conference, you meet a person from another firm, you share cards, and you make a friendship, and later on it develops into a partnership. So I am asking, what I'm saying to you, the power of collaboration, the power of teamwork. And that's how KAA is what it is. That's how I derive a lot of passion and interest in remaining as a partner in KAA. Not necessarily because of the money, but because of the opportunity. I worked closely with Bruce initially. He was an associate. At one point, he was not appearing in court. He had not enrolled as an advocate, and we had appeals. But I would go with him. That today, he's the one who goes to court with this gentleman. I don't go to court anymore. Why? Because delegation, which I mentioned to you, the power of delegation. He delegates. These gentlemen here go to court on their own now because they have benefited from that teamwork. And that is one thing I want to urge most of you to do. This business of wanting to do things by yourself, you do the objection, you draft the pleadings, you are the litigator in court, sometimes you want to be the witness, you want to be everything. That will not work. Learn to work with others, learn to delegate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Those were very, very candid points to make, Doctor. You've taken very well, Doctor. Colleagues, Doctor emphasizes networking. So if you can't afford that international conference, at least you can afford the tax nights. Yeah, and kudos to the KA team, the right over here. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Dr. Kambona, tax litigation is something you speak very fondly of, and every litigation never forgets experience in court. Yeah, are there any 1, 2, 3 tax cases that you handled, very groundbreaking, yeah, that you still recall till today? And why those 1? Why not? Why those 2? Why those 3?
I don't want to mention the tallows, the capital gains, because there was nothing novel about that. I mean, we were litigating over capital gains and the fact that your government had given a waiver and things like that. But for me, one case that stands out is what I mentioned, the Rubble Enterprises, where I believed in something against the proprietary position, went for it, and it was found to be groundbreaking. All cases go to the tribunal. You can see, we may have our issues with the tribunal, the previous tribunals, but I have always mentioned that I am so energized by the current tribunal. I am so energized by the current tribunal. I may have my issues with the past, but I have seen energy in the current tribunal. And so I am proud that what I fought for has now, I have been vindicated. Because my point was, let's not fight a principle just because we disagree with personalities. In fact, I used to tell people that for me, even in the past, where I used to disagree with some members, I used to tell them, please give me a decision. Whether in my favor or against me, please give me a decision. Why? If I disagree with you, I will appeal. I have another avenue. I don't have to be bound by your decision if I am not in agreement with it. But give me a decision. I go to the commercial division and I raise the same point. Give me a decision. So one of those decisions that I'm proud of is Rubble. Another interesting case was the case by MultiChoice. MultiChoice Uganda versus URA. Now, in that case, what happened was that MultiChoice Uganda was, of course, providing DSTV services to people in Uganda. And the importer of the service is the person who pays the VAT. Now, URA comes to MultiChoice and says, you are importing a service from South Africa, please pay tax. And my question was, correct. MultiChoice Uganda, my client, imports this service. But who is importing the service? Critically, when I went through the evidence, it was me and you in our homes. Why? I get a dish, I switch on, the pictures come through. So it is the subscriber who is the importer of the service. Now the problem was, how is URA going to go to Oscar's house, go to Stella's house, and ask for tax? So it became a problem for URA in terms of collection. The best they had to do was to amend the law. Now, in that particular case, we had a very interesting fight with the URA. You will see some of the cases in the compendium. One of the fights we had was 30%. At that point, I started arguing in the Tax Appeals Tribunal that the Tax Appeals Tribunal says you shall pay 30% pending final resolution. And for me, pending final resolution can be 1 day before the judgment. It doesn't have to be at the time I'm filing the case that I must pay 30%. And we had the fight and we went up to the commercial division. And the court in the commercial division said, but that's the law. The law is saying pending final resolution. Was there a judgment? I said, there's no judgment yet. So why is URA demanding 30%? So the case was dismissed. Now, they got a problem. Because the question would be, you would have to ask the tribunal 1 day before they deliver their judgment. When are you going to deliver the judgment? And 1 day before it, let's pay 30%. So that's why eventually they introduced the 30% in the laws, in the Income Tax Act and in the VAT law. Recently, these were amended and removed, but the one in the Tax Appeals Tribunal has been maintained. In the same wording, but the problem is that the court since interpreted it that you must pay when you file. So there are quite a number of cases I look up to, but for me, the point, and this is the third point I mentioned here, the point of having the courage to be different. I may be wrong, I'm not always right, I lose cases, but I have the courage to pursue a different line. I have the courage to pursue a different line. I don't care, like I told you, if I lose at the lower court and the reasoning is sound, I will advise my client. And by the way, if I'm to talk about something that we need to do as lawyers and as accountants, we need to detach emotionally from our cases. Let's learn to detach from our cases. I have gone for hearings, and when I enter, the lawyer is sweating. The lawyer is sweating, he's anxious about the case, and I ask him, please relax. What is the problem? Oh, I'm worried they are going to rule against my client. My dear, that's not your case. Detach from the case. Do the best you can. If the decision is not against you, it doesn't mean you're a bad lawyer or a bad accountant. No. It means that somebody has interpreted it differently. By the way, why are there appeal courts? There are appeal courts because the lower court may get it wrong. The lower court may get it wrong. So for me, I learn to detach emotionally from cases. You come to me, and even in some cases, sorry to digress a bit, in some cases which were not necessarily tax, criminal cases, I have seen situations where they deny somebody bail and the lawyer almost collapses. Just because they have denied the client bail. And I am saying, no, ladies and gentlemen, you are not the client. You are a lawyer of the client. Do your best. Whatever the outcome is not.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Kambona. Those are equally very pertinent. And I think what we get from Doctor is be very passionate about your cases. Let them make impact. And ladies and gentlemen, we're still very honored to have in our midst two profound attendees. We're honored to have two members of the Tax Appeals Tribunal that have joined us and right here with us. The first is Mrs. Stella Nyapendi Chombo. She's right here. And right next to Stella is Miss Grace Safi. She's right there. If you've read those tribunal decisions, I believe you've seen these amazing ladies do justice. So Dr. Kambona, I want you to speak to that young lady and that young gentleman that is attending and listening to you. Run us back 25 years ago, that young Oscar. Very many of us are trying to forge our careers in tax practice. So I need to speak to that young lady, that young gentleman, from your distinguished career and your wealth of experience. What, in your view, are those top skills that a young practitioner should garner, should grow, and should take hold of?
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to keep your eye on 4 things. Keep your eye on 4 things. Number 1, connection. Very important. Keep your eye on connections. Gone are the days where a client is passing by and sees Chomu and Company Advocates and walks in and says, I have a tax case. Those days are not there anymore. That a client is walking around and sees your name tag, and comes and gives you a case. Well, maybe downtown. You may have those contract of sale agreements where they want to sell a car and what. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for connection. You're looking for those cases that are calling for connection. That is point number 1. Point number 2, mindset. Mindset. What's your mindset? Do you have a scarce mentality? Mindset? Do you have an abundance mentality? There is enough work. There is enough work in this space of taxation. And why do I say so? Remember, all companies in Uganda must pay tax. They are potential taxpayers. They may not be paying, but they are potential taxpayers. With the strengthening of the URA and diversifying and broadening the tax base, those that have not been paying will eventually pay. And remember, those that have not been paying will find it so hard to pay what they are supposed to pay. So they will come to you for advice. Mindset. Mindset also comes with belief. Believe in yourself. I know of some people who don't believe they have the competence to represent big companies. Believe in yourself. So, connection. Number 2, mindset. Number 3, keep your eye on skill. Keep your eye on skill. Can you improve your skill? How many lawyers have done courses on transfer pricing? It's the in thing that is doing the rounds now. You can create time. I don't believe in people who say I don't have time. I'm so busy I don't have time. Are you sure you don't have time? It's a question of priorities. In fact, I'm reminded of Stephen Covey. Those who have read his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen Covey said, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. If you get that right, so what's the main thing according to you? That is not for me to say. But the main thing is to create time for your profession. Enhance your skill. Do as many trainings as you can. Create the time. Create the resources. These symposiums I've seen organized by the Law Society. It costs nothing to go here and listen. So improve on your skills. If it means, it doesn't necessarily mean, and don't get me wrong, improving skills does not necessarily mean for you to go to Harvard first and do a master's. It's important too, but you can also enhance your skills from these courses that are taking place. That's very important. So, number 3, 1, connection, 2, mindset, 3, skill. But most importantly, number 4, ethics. Ethics. Ladies and gentlemen, the difference between you and another lawyer may be your integrity. You've heard of very good lawyers. You mention his name, they say, don't tell me about that lawyer. Why? They've dropped the ball when it comes to integrity. What does integrity mean? Do what you promise to do. If you say, I will handle your case, I will handle your case. That's integrity. As simple as that. It doesn't necessarily mean I will win your case. The two are different. Ethics is very important. Money. You know, one of the things I struggled with when we started the KAA was the issue of clients' money. How do you, in many cases, the client would send you the 30% so that you pay it. And you can see the temptation. You have got 10 billion on your account and your salaries have not been paid. Your salaries for the month are not going to be paid. You can't see where the money is coming from. Yet you have 10 billion on your account. The temptation is to say, let me use some of this, I'll replace it. That's dishonesty. Whether you actually replace it or not, that's dishonesty. So, ethics is very important. I'm so happy, and I think LDC has now emphasized professional ethics as a subject. Is it now a separate subject? Professional ethics? No, that's not right. Professional, one of the subsidiary subjects at LDC, one of the general subjects was professional ethics. Professional ethics is something that we ignore, but it can cost you your reputation. So, to your answer, 4 things: connection, mindset, skill, and finally, ethics. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Dr. Alaron spoke very fondly of a gentleman, Bruce Musinguzi. Yeah, he spoke very fondly of him. He was here earlier on, but he's just gotten back. So Bruce, kindly wave to the people who might not be knowing. So, yeah, so to any good friend of ours who wants to join KA, the guy you see is right here. Oscar is no longer there. But also, if you fail to get Bruce, you have these 2 amazing gentlemen, Ferdinand and Julius, right here.
No, I'm there. I don't go to court alone. I'm there. I'm in KA. This is part of my team.
Right.
But I don't go to court alone. That's why I say the delegation and teamwork works.
All right. So if you want, first convince the big man. But all right, Doctor, now let's run fast forward. You did something very many tax practitioners and mainly the practitioners don't find pleasing. That's a career and a PhD. Yeah, you did a master's, then later on you do a PhD. So we just want to hear it from you. What was your inspiration? What drove you? We very much know people in the academia, the ones who do PhDs, professors and the like, but you are a tax litigator. You are very passionate about litigation. We see you going and attaining that prestigious qualification. What was your inspiration? What drove you there? What kept you going?
One of the things I did early on in my career was to ask myself, what are my values? What are those things that I leave my bed in the morning and look up to? What are the things I value? And I came up with 3 values: excellence, impact, and growth. Those were my 3 values: excellence, impact, and growth. When I do something, I endeavor to be excellent at it. I don't endeavor to be perfect. I want to make the distinction between excellence and perfection. Excellence is striving to do the best you can. Perfection is in someone's judgment, whether I'm perfect or not. And that's why the problem comes. People want to become perfect, and perfect is a moving target. What is perfect to him is not perfect to her. So that's not my value. My value is excellence. The second value is impact. Whatever I do must have impact. Can the little work I do, the case I take on, can it impact the business I am representing? And third was growth, personal growth. Am I growing? Am I growing? Is there growth in whatever I am doing? Now, the third one, growth, brought me into the academia, into pursuing further studies. Because I asked myself, how do I grow myself as Oscar? I mentioned at the introduction that I'm a leader without a title, but I lead myself first and foremost. I lead myself as Oscar. So, for me to be able to grow, I must acquire knowledge. And for me to be able to acquire knowledge, I must do what I call continuous learning. When I come here, the first thing I learn is, do you call it bingo? I start filling in bingo. And I am studying what is the intention of this bingo. What is it? I'm learning. That's the learning. So, to answer your question, my quest for knowledge, which then translates into growth for me, drove me to do further studies. Because I'm learning. And as you will see, my thesis in PhD was not only on taxation, but the link between taxation and human rights. Enforcement of taxation and human rights. In fact, Madame Stella was one of my respondents. She graciously answered my questionnaire and gave me a lot of insight. What I was trying to investigate, if you mistreat me as a taxpayer, what are the chances that I will comply? Is there a correlation between enforcement, rights, and compliance? Those are some of the things I was learning. I had practiced in taxation, but there was something more I could learn. So knowledge was something. But finally, I asked myself, where do you see yourself in retirement? If I could use the word retirement. I started from when I introduced myself. When I left LDC, the first thing I did was to go to court. So I started in practice straight away. It's not my wish to retire in practice. Some people start in, Sarah may be in the tribunal, but she may want to end up in practice. So sometimes we see people, I gave you an example of Justice Katurebe, who was the Attorney General. He talks to me when he's leaving the executive as an Attorney General. He's coming into practice. If he decides to retire in practice, it's different from me. Because I started in practice, so I end somewhere. And the question to me, where are you going to end? Can you think of yourself? Even at your age, you have to ask yourself, what is my plan when I eventually reach that retirement age? Whatever age you decide. And for me, the answer was, you will go back and teach. Because like I said, the best way to learn is to teach. I love growth. I love continuous learning. So as I teach, I learn more. So part of my going to school is to prepare myself for that time. That time when I go back into teaching. And one of the requirements now, for you to teach, for example, at a law school, unless you want to be a tutorial assistant, you must have a PhD. You must have a PhD. So, yes, based on my values, based on my intended retirement, I decided to do my further studies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Ladies and gentlemen, we are wrapping it up. Doctor, just two questions. The very first one, Doctor, on Friday at your graduation, your managing partner, Mr. Joseph Masiko, made a very interesting remark. He said, the problem with Oscar is he's so generous. He gave an example. One time he came into the farm, a half of the farm was not in, and he asked the HR, where are all these guys? The HR tells him, they're in Dubai. And he's like, Dubai, how? They're like, Oscar carried the entire team to Dubai on his account, on his money. So Oscar, that's the question for a lawyer of your stature. You're so very big on humility. You're so selfless. What drives you? Why are you that special?
Because, I step back. Remember I talked about the value of teamwork? For me, the people I work with are first and foremost my friends. First and foremost, they are my friends. I will meet Bruce, we'll have a drink together, although he doesn't drink the hard stuff. I also don't drink the hard stuff. We share water together, but we will laugh. We will laugh about it. We will share pleasantries. Why? Because first and foremost, beyond being a colleague as a tax partner, he is my friend. So friendship is very important. And I say to you, you don't have to focus only on the nitty-gritty of skill. How we win the case is very important, but how the people win the case is also very important. One of the things I believe in and still emphasize is timeout. You mentioned what that is a true story, by the way. That's a true story. We went to Dubai just to have a good time and participate in the marathon, the Dubai Marathon. One of my passions is in running. I encouraged some of my colleagues here to join running, and they agreed. And so the best thing was to go and participate in a marathon in Dubai, the Dubai Marathon. But behind it, the generosity behind it has got a lot to do with what I believe in. Teamwork. What I believe in teamwork. But let me also mention something. I draw a line between time out and having fun and time for work. I draw that line because I believe in something called discipline. I believe in something called discipline. One of the things I made sure was that I was sure none of them had a pending case during that period. If you had a pending case, you are not on the group. Discipline. And by the way, for me, if you asked me what success is two things to me. It's not how much I have on the bank account. Success is two things. Number one is discipline. The moment you are disciplined, if you can discipline yourself even at a personal level. How many of you have made resolutions this year to cut weight and go to the gym? Ladies and gentlemen, if you go to the gym up to the end of this year, you are successful. That's success. So number one, discipline. Success is discipline. But number two is what I call inner satisfaction. The inner satisfaction. What makes you as a lawyer satisfied? Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think you can derive satisfaction in materialism. That you have bought a house in Kololo and therefore you are satisfied. I don't think that is possible. The moment you buy that house, tomorrow the broker will come and tell you there is a better house in Bugolobi, and you will want that house. But wealth is a moving target. For me, inner satisfaction is the joy you get from getting fulfillment, achievement. Do you know what it means when somebody walks into your farm and gives you a case and tells you, my wife who has been nagging me for the last 20 years, I want her out of that house. And you go in and solve the dispute, and they part amicably, and the man goes and is a happy man tomorrow, and the woman is a happy woman. You see the satisfaction you get? The fulfillment that you have achieved a success, a win-win for both parties. That is satisfaction. That's the joy I'm looking for. So I'm looking for discipline, I'm looking for satisfaction. When my colleague here, Julius Caesar, goes and runs and he feels good at the end of the run, for me that's satisfaction. I'm satisfied that I have encouraged him to run and he has picked it and it has benefited him. So yes, The generosity comes, but it is a route to the bigger issue that I'm looking for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Doctor, next time there is a marathon in London or Greece, I can also run. I believe I can run better than Ferdinand. So don't forget me, Doctor. Yeah, Doctor, just to wrap it up, a very final question is that, Doctor, from your wealth of experience, you've seen it all, done it all. What, in your view, is the future of tax from where you sit? First tax case in the Tax Appeals Tribunal, first consultant, first everything. Seen it all, done it all. What, in your view, is the future of tax? Where is this whole thing going?
Two things. One, I have a dream. I have a dream that tax practice is going to grow and become the dominant practice in Uganda. That's my dream. Is it misplaced? No. Why is it not misplaced? Two things. Number one, URA is tightening up. URA is tightening up. And there are definitely going to be many disputes coming from that direction. So the future of practice in that sector is growing and will grow. That's my dream. But secondly, we are getting an efficient dispute resolution process. It's one thing to have a case, and it's one thing for the case to be resolved. Now, if you give me a case and I spend with it 10 years in court, ladies and gentlemen, am I making up statements? I have evidence. I have a case I am involved in. I can give you the facts and you can go and cross-check them. NSSF versus URA. The first time they came to me and Bruce was in 2013. That's when they gave us the case. The case is in the Court of Appeal. 2013 case. How many years are those? How many? 13 years. 13 years we are still in court. My fees will never change. Just because I spent 13 years in court, my fees will not increase. So for me, it's not enough to have the work if there is no proper dispute resolution mechanism that is working. And that's why I always appreciate the tribunal. The thing I have seen with the tribunal, they think outside the box. Gone are the days when you will go to the tribunal and you know I have a bad case. You will go there and come out a winner because they have interpreted it to create jurisprudence. But more importantly, which I always emphasize, they are trying their best to resolve disputes. How many cases are being decided nowadays? Very many. I look at the cause list and their judgments to be delivered. For me, even the High Court, they are working on backlog. They are trying to introduce technology. They are doing so many things. So for me, the future of tax practice becomes helpful and bright if the dispute resolution mechanism is working. Right from the alternative dispute resolution process in the URA to the tribunal and to the courts of law. And for me, that's where I see a bright future in tax practice. And my parting shot to ladies and gentlemen, my parting shot is where I started. I end where I started. Are you prepared? I want to ask yourself, while everything is being put in place, are you prepared for the task? Remember, I talked about preparation meeting opportunity being success. The opportunity is going to come, but are you going to wait until the opportunity surfaces for you to be prepared? I keep saying to my colleagues, I keep saying to my clients and the people I interact with, the difference between a good lawyer and a perfect lawyer and not so good lawyer, the difference is the level of preparation. Simple. I was sharing with one of my clients. She was an auditor in one of my clients, and I handled the case with her. I was sharing with her, and I was saying to her, there are instances where I have interacted with lawyers, and they are on the phone calling the clerk. You go to my cabin, there's a yellow file on the top with the whatever on it, a rubber band on it. Bring it to me. He has come from home. It is on a Monday. He's going straight to court, and they bring the file, and he's looking through to acquaint himself with the facts of the case. Is that the preparation you want? So my point to you is that the opportunities are coming. The opportunities will come, but are we prepared for them? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that can work for Otim and I, but Doctor deserves a much bigger round of applause. Thank you very much, Doctor. Our time is fast spent, but I just want to give an opportunity to two lucky, preferably gentlemen and a lady, to pose any question, anything to Dr. Kambona. Otim, you could help me. Ladies and gentlemen, anyone, any two, our time is fast spent. At least don't ask to join the marathon. The marathon team already full.
Good evening, everyone. It's been such a pleasure to listen to the doctor. I only have one question for the young lawyers in the room. What are the two things that they can do to, stand out? Because the truth is, the market is kind of saturated. Like there's a good number of us out there. So if they could do like 2 or 3 things, that you could tell the young lawyer out there, what can they do so that they can stand out and be noticed in the scene? And what would the biggest in the field?
Young lawyers, and by extension, the young accountants in this room. Of course, I mentioned about the things that will separate you from an average. When I mentioned, of course, skill, mindset. But let me answer to your question specifically. The young lawyers and the young accountants in this hall need to master what we call first things first. The principle of first things first. What is the first thing when you leave school? It's not to start a law firm. Is it the first thing you have to do? To start a law firm? No. The first thing you need to do is to get an opportunity to do your profession, start your career. So, when you join that firm, it then brings me to the second point, which is my value, excellence. Remember, I've said first things first, go to the law firm, get a job, go to URA, get a job. But when you get there, what will keep you there, what will make the difference there is how you do your job with excellence. Not perfection, please, ladies and gentlemen, not perfection. Don't target for perfection. That my boss will say this is A material. Yes, let him say it, but that was not your objective. Your objective is excellence. And what is excellence? I defined it as striving to do your best. So, that lawyer who was calling for the file, in my view, was not doing an excellent job. What does it mean? What does it take for you to relax on Sunday and prepare for your case on Monday? Because you are combining things. You are combining so many things at the same time. You are combining legal work, you are combining that farm you are starting up in the village, you are combining hanging out with peers and friends, you're combining so many things. And so, the two things I want to say to you, first things first, and two, excellence. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Doctor, I have one question. I'm an insolvency practitioner, and there's always been a nexus between insolvency and tax. Normally, unsecured creditors end up not being paid. And really the ultimate remedy is to maybe assist them and get their supplies written off as bad debts. But there's been a big challenge. What has been your experience in assisting such clients who have been faced with consequences of insolvency? Thank you very much.
Can we put our hands together for that gentleman? That gentleman is thinking outside the box. You remember he's saying, I'm an insolvency lawyer. Someone would have expected him to say, I'm a company lawyer, I'm a land lawyer. Insolvency is an emerging area of practice. And this is what I was, the point I said we clap for him is because this fits in with what I was saying, being creative. But being creative requires one skill. Be adaptable. Be adaptable. Creativity requires adaptability because you have to adapt to the circumstances. Now, are things going to go your way? Let me answer that question in general terms. He's frustrated because what he wants to do is not being followed. Perhaps what he has read is not being realized. So his expectations are slightly there, and the reality is slightly below it. The reality is not meeting his expectation, and he's asking, what do I do? And that's where adaptability comes in. Adaptability basically means the circumstances, your expectations may not be meeting the circumstances, so you need to realign your strategy. Remember, if I could just digress a bit, remember at the beginning I said that success is 20% skill and 80% strategy. So the question you are asking me is, what strategy should I have? And you must put time into getting that strategy right. Like you said, the ranking of creditors. Ranking of creditors, that in itself is a dispute on its own. Is URA a first-ranked creditor? Some may say yes, some may say no. You get me? You know the ranking of creditors. Who comes first? Sometimes they say statutory duties, but what about the person who issued that loan in the first place? When it comes to insolvency, who is ranked first? So, but in general terms, for me, what I'm saying to you, have your strategy right. If it means changing your initial strategy and adopting something different, do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Ladies and gentlemen, that marks the end of our conversation with the legendary Dr. Oscar Kambona. Another round of applause to Dr. Oscar. Thank you very much, Doctor, for being kind to spend an evening with us, to walk us through your distinguished career, but also give us snippets and learning opportunities. We take those in very good faith. And ladies and gentlemen, like we always do at the Tax Hub and at the Tax Nights, we always appreciate such distinguished practitioners who have walked the journey before us, but are very kind enough to still get back to us and impact a skill or two. So I'll ask Otim and his colleagues over there. We have Madame Stella Nyapendi Chombo amidst us. So I'll invite Stella just to give a token of appreciation to Dr. Kambona for his very candid discussion. There's a lot we learned in there. So Dr. Kambona, this is a very humble token of appreciation.
A round of applause once again for the doctor. What a very flexible career, just an investigation.
I just wanted to appreciate the Tax Hub. Again, we talk about being creative and innovative. This is a good initiative. Thank you for the invitation. And I promise that in future, when the time comes, I'll be here once again. Thank you once again.